Hello everyone, it's Silvia. Welcome back to my channel. Today you're probably going to hear me a little bit frustrated because I make it a point to, when I buy a new deck, to understand it. I make it a point to try and bond with this deck, and I make it a point to be sure 100% before I start using it that I know what I'm doing. And I'm not referring to knowing what the meaning of the traditional RWS cards are, because that's something that I know the meanings, I know how to read them. If you give me the traditional RWS, I could read with it without any hesitation whatsoever, no matter what the combinations, reversals, and so on and so forth. That is not a problem. And that comes from decades of studying and reading with that deck. But occasionally, more than occasionally lately, I just want to be surprised. I just want to have a deck that it's not the traditional RWS clone. I want a deck that surprises me, that challenges me. I want a deck that makes me want to study. I want a deck that makes me change my mind when it comes to a particular meaning of a particular card. And when I find a deck that does that, I am so happy. I'm just literally bursting with joy because it's an amazing experience. And I had that recently when I bought the Unveiled Tarot. The Unveiled Tarot is just absolutely fantastic because even though it does use the RWS system, but it presents it in a way that it really gives you almost as if it were an additional way or window into the system itself. It gives you a different perspective. It still drives the point home by making you understand the way in which you need to read and interpret that card, but it does so in a very clever way. I've actually filmed the walkthrough, and if you guys have followed my channel for any length of time, you will know that I don't often do that. I just don't think, I think there's a million people giving out walkthroughs on any social media platform you can name it, and you guys don't need me to give you a walkthrough. And yet that video, I did it mostly for myself, because I really wanted to tell the world or whomever was watching the video what I felt about that deck, and it was an amazing experience. And I believe that kind of spoiled my view on other decks that came into my collection in the last, I would say, probably 6 months. And my approach to them has slightly changed because I'm kind of expecting to fall in love with them as much as I did with the Unveiled Tarot, and it's not the case. And they want me to give up because no matter what I try, no matter how much research I try to do, no matter how much I'm trying my best to understand the author's, the creator's perspective when coming up with a certain symbology that is not the traditional one, I am nothing but open-minded. Honestly, yes, of course I'm traditional, of course I like traditions, but I also am open-minded to a change to those traditions, because guess what? Having a scientific kind of mentality means that I understand that we need evolution, we need to go forward, we need to move on. And so sometimes it is by trying different things that we move on. But unfortunately, these decks are making me very frustrated, and I don't know whether they don't make me frustrated all for the same reason, so I will explain why. But with this video, I'm actually asking for help to the community. If you have one of these decks that I'm going to present today and you are very comfortable and confident with your interpretation of the cards and the meaning, etc., please get in touch with me, because I feel like I need the help of the community, because I've done a lot of work of research on my own, and it just, let's face it, it just didn't really lead to any epiphany or discovery, and so I kind of need your help. But let's explain what I mean, because I don't know whether I made my point clear. So there are decks. such as this one. This is the Spirit Keeper's Tarot. This is the Revelation edition, and I believe it's the second print of the Revelation edition. And this deck is by Annabelle Wen. I love her. She's anything as close to an encyclopedia of tarot as you could possibly be. She knows so much about the occult, and she's not afraid to show her knowledge. And when she came out, she created, well, this is the third iteration of the Spirit Keepers. The first one was I believe the black and white, and then the sepia tones, the Vitruvian, I believe it was called, and then there's this one, the Revelation. But this is also the second printing. There are a few changes between the first and the second printing, I believe, also in the saturation of the colors or the backs. But this, no matter how many, she could come up with 20 iterations of this deck, and with just as many reprints and simplifications and books. This is a difficult deck, and I talked about this deck when I was showing my top 10 most difficult decks of all times. This is probably, maybe not number one, because I believe that lately I have acquired a deck that is actually, if you can believe it, even more difficult than this one. But it is difficult for a different reason. So let's just park it right there and let's talk about this deck. This deck is really gorgeous. I actually objectively really like it. What makes it difficult is not an abstruse or far-fetched interpretation of the cards that really doesn't make any sense. What makes it difficult is the amount of symbology that Annabelle has imbued these cards with, because you can see it. I mean, even when you have a relatively simple card like this one, Herald of the Winds, for example, this is the title associated with, I believe, I don't even know, but I believe it might be one of the core cards of the air, the suit of air, because it talks about winds, and also because the character here is holding, I don't know if you can see, a what looks like a sword or some kind of a dagger, long dagger, most likely a sword. And then you have a I Ching here, and then you have another symbol. And then you go to the next card and you have the Archangel of Glory, and you have all of these symbols here. And then you have more I Ching and other symbols. And it's just, and it is a tarot deck. So it's not an oracle deck. It's not a Marseille, because as you can see, it doesn't have pips. It is an actual tarot deck. And when, for example, we look at this card, so this is the Five of Chalices. And this is clear because it is the Five of Cups. But you don't, and you know the meaning of the Five of Cups. Let's put it this way. We know the meaning of the Five of Cups, right? The loss, don't cry over spilled milk. However, for the person who's actually spilled the milk, it feels like the world has ended. So if you're an innocent bystander or an outsider, you actually see the situation. You can tell the person, look beyond the horizon, because something is actually still standing and it's there for you. You just need to move on. But the person who's going through these feelings at the moment, it feels pretty much wrecked. So we know everything about the Five of Cups. We know that it's the suit of water. We know that it's associated with Scorpio 1. We can actually, when we start reminding ourselves of what we know about the card, we can actually spot the symbols and we can kind of recognize them. But it's still difficult. And look, I'm sorry, but I'm being honest here. I love this deck. Do I use it? No. And it's because I respect this deck too much to use it without necessarily knowing what I'm doing. And I still want to study. I could eventually, of course, this is the Ace of Chalices, so it's the Ace of Cups. It's called the Holy Grail. I get it, it's the element of water. I can see the alchemical element there. Can I read a card that I know that is the Ace of Cups? Of course I can read the card that is the Ace of Cups, but I don't want to approach this deck. And because of my ignorance about this deck, I recur to the last refuge of someone who still wants to read the card but doesn't know anything about that specific deck. So you read it the way you would read the RWS, the way you would read a clone, the way you would normally read it. I believe that if I did that, I wouldn't need more than 4 or 5 decks. I don't have 4 or 5 decks. I have 500 decks. And so when it comes to that, I feel like I kind of need to defend myself, as in I have a big collection. Not because I need a big collection, I am also a collector, so obviously the collectible items have a different meaning in my collection, but also when it comes to mass market decks that are readily available, I don't have the excuse of saying, oh no, they're gonna go out of print and they are collectible items. We know that that's not the case, at least not for years. But I want to say to people, look, I actually read with slightly different perspective the cards, because I follow the creator's view, I follow their vision, I follow the way in which they created that deck in a specific way. And believe me, but lately I've actually looked at decks, and unless the artwork is actually out of this world, I don't buy them if they don't give me a different perspective. And that doesn't mean a perspective with which I do not agree. There is one deck that has the depiction of the Empress, and it's called the Tarot of the Unexplained. And I like it because I love everything about cryptids. I really love the supernatural and the association of the supernatural with of local folklore. I really love that. We'll see that later. But when something points to a card and it just doesn't make sense for me, that's when I disagree. And so the Empress is depicted as La Llorona. La Llorona is a Mexican supernatural being that to be honest, I've talked about La Llorona a number of times, and I always say the same thing. See, myths and legends occur when people want to explain something that it's either too painful, too sad, too cruel for the human mind to accept. And so we recur to the supernatural because we tell ourselves, I don't believe that a person actually did that. So this mother drowned her children, and nowadays we know that unfortunately things like postpartum depression are real, and we would have helped this person, this mother, we would have helped her, hopefully we would have helped her, and hopefully we would have tried to solve this situation without ending it in tragedy. Unfortunately back then that was not a possibility. And the result of that is this woman who probably was in excruciating pain, and she drowned her own children, but she's forever doomed to seek them out. But because they're with her and in the water, what she's doomed to do is to kidnap other children from other families. And then because she has to take them with her, she drowns them as well. So you see, that is something that, like many yokai in Japan folklore, it stems from the will of the human mind to believe that tragedy occurs to others but not to us. And when it does occur to others, you can actually think that it's the fruit of supernatural. I don't believe that the Empress represents La Llorona. I believe that the Empress reversed could represent La Llorona, for example, the destruction of that creation. So that is a different thing. That's not what I'm seeing in these decks. I have absolutely no problem. Once I understand them, I have absolutely no problem in relating with these decks, but I need to understand them. It is very frustrating for me because I have not in many cases, and that is making me want to give up because I have more than 500 decks. There are so many that are waiting for me to bond with them, and I can't because I'm still stuck with these ones. So help me out, guys. I wanted to show you another deck that I think may even make my point even more clear. So this is the Hexen 2.0 Tarot by Susanne Treister. This is a deck that has been out of print for a number of years, I believe, and then it was reprinted, and this is the difference. I believe it's in the color of the box. I'm not entirely sure. I don't have the original. I know that people were selling the original for like $700. I generally never really wanted to reach for this deck for that price, because I didn't find it to be something I would fall in love with. However, when I saw that it was selling on Amazon, for example, for like 60, 70 Australian dollars, I did splurge on it. It's not something I would spend on a deck that I'm not convinced that I'm going to like, but it is incredibly intriguing, and I wanted to make sense of this deck. So I did not know that there would not have been a guidebook. This is, okay, let's just talk about this leaflet. I wouldn't know how else to call it. So this is like a A3, is it? Whatever size information kind of leaflet that you find inside. And it talks about the inspiration in Susanne's work. It talks about why certain things were compelling for her in order for her to show them in the cards. But it doesn't go in a systematic way. This is the full, this is what is represented on the full, this is what it means, this is Susanne's interpretation, etc. Like you would in a general little white book or even a companion book. This one is literally, let's say, a larger form of introduction to a deck that I read and liked. Absolutely, I loved it. I love that Susanne was inspired by so many things, and that she was not just inspired by so many things, but also that she was not overwhelmed by them, and she could produce a deck. But it's not helping me to bond more with the deck. And if everyone thinks that this is a QR code for a guidebook of some sort, it's actually not. I tried. This is about artwork. So it takes you to Susanne's website and her artwork, but it's not you can find more information about this tarot deck, but it's not, as I said, a systematic guide. And I feel that when we are in front of a deck like this one, we kind of need something systematic. We kind of need something that we feel comfortable with, because even if it's very boring, as in just looking at the full card telling you who this person is, Aldous Huxley. I know who Aldous Huxley was, but it doesn't mean that everyone does. And to be honest, yes, of course, there's a lot of words here, and you could spend a good 10 minutes reading these words. You don't necessarily understand whether they are related to what the character on the card actually did, and you don't necessarily understand whether that is meaningful for the interpretation of the Fool in this case. So you end up, okay, well, 1962 Ireland. Science fiction, one world order, Snooze, Lars LSD, MIT. You have a bunch of dates, you have a bunch of words. If you don't necessarily know anything about this character, these words are not gonna give you an epiphany moment, as I was saying earlier. It just probably adds on to the chaos. And of course, yes, we live in 2025, and of course we can use Google, and I did. But after Googling, and even, let me tell you, I didn't actually Google Aldous Huxley, because I actually even read his book. So I didn't necessarily need to. I will at some point, but I wanted to Google about the characters, or, the things, the Macy conferences. I'm very ignorant about that. I don't know. I didn't know what the Macy conferences were. So that's something that I had to Google. But as you can see here, it's not just something that you can Google for like 5 seconds and then move on. You have to read it, you have to study it, and because I'm a bit particular when it comes to these kind of things, I actually want to go deeper. And so it took me probably 3 hours just for the Macy conferences for the High Priestess. And then we got the Empress, and all of these names, I mean, when you look at them, you go, okay, well, I recognize the MI6 or the CIA because I know that the MI6 is the military intelligence number 6, which is the equivalent of the CIA in the UK. So I know that. I was watching James Bond. But then, I don't know, what's CIO, what's MSS, what's SAPO, what's CNI, what's JSO, what's NIS, what DGI, MI5 I know, what's G2, FBI I know. So there's so many things. So just to know all this, you see the countries, because for example MTM, it says Azerbaijan. I don't know if you can tell that the writing is very small as well, so I definitely need my reading glasses, which is fine. I'm happy to wear them, but at the same time it is an additional kind of obstacle that you need to go around or go on top of. And this has taken a lot of time to Google all these, and I don't even entirely know all of them. I can just Google 3 or 4 of them and assume that they're all the same. So Secret Service, secret agents, in a specific country. I see Mossad, for example. I don't know if they have the Italian one. Probably not. We did, for a period of time, we had Gladio. Anyway, moving on. So the Emperor, and do you see, I don't know, I've been speaking for probably 10 minutes about this deck, and I'm not done yet, and I'm just at the Hierophant, and when I look at it, and I go, Lieutenant Colonel, retired Jim Channon, and I don't know who this guy was. I'm so sorry, and I feel I am very ignorant about these things, and it makes me feel like I really have to spend probably months on this deck. And you go on and it's 78 cards. There's 78 cards like this. And not to talk about the fact that in some cases I may actually not agree. So I remember talking about one of these cards. It is something very confrontational. There is a character in these cards that is quite confrontational, because he's provoked a lot of pain to a lot of people. And I remember, someone commenting, as soon as I saw this person portrayed in this card, I rehomed this deck, because I disagree. I don't want to, give my money to a creator that is using this person on this card. And I get it. I might understand the symbology. I may understand the really convoluted ways in which we may associate one particular character in history with a particular major arcana. But does that mean that every time that I'm going to use this deck, I'm not going to cringe? No, I think I will be cringing. And at the same time, I do find that there's some amazing characters here. Ada Lovelace, who was a mathematician, for example, fantastic. Fantastic to have the acknowledging power of how someone has been so important, and woman, as well. But then we have, for example, Six of Pentacles with Robert Oppenheimer. I get it. I understand the Six of Pentacles is doing something for someone else and gaining from that as well. But Six of Pentacles, Robert Oppenheimer, to me, Robert Oppenheimer is a Seven of Swords, because he is the person that had to do, it was forced, he had to do something horrible to create something, an instrument of death, literally. But there were reasons, so it's against his morals, against his own judgments, against his own life. He died of cancer in his 50s, early 50s. He had a very difficult life. He was in a lot of pain, but he was also a genius. And if you watch the movie Oppenheimer, you will see a fantastic, really fantastic performance by Cillian Murphy. I love Cillian Murphy. But you also understand how devastating his Oppenheimer's life was, and his decision and everything he had to do, and everything he had to unfortunately also, you know, force himself to do, and so on and so forth. And so that to me is the Seven of Swords. You are forced by the circumstances to do something that you would normally not do. It would be against your moral and your code. I don't see it for the Six of Pentacles. I can work on it. Of course, I can convince myself. I can go through that. But this is taking me ages, eons of time, oceans of time. And I'm not entirely sure that this is going to be a deck that I will use even after I will feel confident that if they pull the Knave of Wands with John Zerzan, I will actually know who this person was, and I will actually know how to associate what this person is famous for with the Knave of Wands. Because I may not agree. So at the end of the day, Hannah Arendt, fantastic, wonderful, amazing, Queen of Wands. I wouldn't say Queen of Cups, but okay, Queen of Wands, she was a writer. A number of things that, okay, I can see that. She wasn't a performer, but she talked about, she was the one that actually started talking about all of the heroes, especially in southern France and northern Italy, that were hiding refugees during the Second World War, and because they just could not cope with what was happening, they just refused to do what they were told to do, and they thought, I need to save a human life, and to me a human life is just a human life. I really don't care where they come from, what the religion is, what the skin color is. I really could not care less. It's a human being. And her work actually brought up a lot of acknowledgement and awareness of these heroes that were people like you and me. No, I don't know if I would have the courage, but my grandpa actually did. My grandpa was doing that. He was a hero. He received the Medal of Honor. He lost his eye because he was beaten up. He was literally going to all of the meetings of the fascist party. He pretended to be a part of the party, and then when they decided to punish someone, he was leaving early and he was going to this place to inform the person, and he was helping them run away. He was caught one day with his brother. His brother was killed and he was beaten up, and he lost one eye. He survived, but he lost one eye. So I love that Hannah Arendt, sorry, I'm pronouncing it, I'm butchering the name, I'm so sorry, but I love that she's here 1000%. But am I going to read the Queen of Wands the way in which I would think of Hannah Arendt? No, because to me she's actually more like a Queen of Swords, because she sees through the black and white, and she's a Queen of Cups because she is compassionate. I'm not entirely sure that I would see her as the Queen of Wands, and I'm sure that there is a way to justify the association, but is it going to change my way of reading a deck? And sorry, I know that I've been talking for 30 minutes and I'm only showing 2 decks so far, so I'm going to speed it up, but I felt like I needed to make this point, because I'm not saying that I'm not saying I don't like these decks. I am not going to rehome this deck, the Hexen 2.0. I'm going to keep it because I believe that it's unique, and I believe that it does have a place in a collection of a person that has more than 500 decks. If I had only 20 decks, I probably wouldn't keep it, because if I had only 20 decks, it means that the decks that I've got are only the decks that I use. I will not be using that deck because it takes me not just a monumental effort in order to understand all of the associations, but at the same time, I'm not entirely sure that that is going to be useful for me as a reader. So moving on, it's not all of these decks, but some of them have these kind of reasonings behind. The next one, and I'm just not going with any particular order. This is a deck that I absolutely love. I wanted this deck for a number of years. It was out of print for a while. It has been published by the Rust Belt Arcana. in the US, and the creator is David Wilson. However, this deck was out of print, and then they started to print it again, but they don't sell it from the Rust Belt Arcana, or Bell Publishing, that's the name of the company, Belt Publishing. So they don't sell it in that website anymore. However, there is a link from that website to another publisher, I believe it's called Arcadia. They published the deck. So if you were looking for this deck, you can find it. It's still available, but not by the original publisher. They're just chosen one distributor in order to sell it online. So I finally got this deck. I love the artwork, and you know me, I am someone who's always intrigued by folklore. I really am. It's not something that I that I shy away from. I'm not scared by it. I think that it's always very interesting. I was someone who, when I was a kid, I insisted on hearing as many stories as possible. I read and reread hundreds of times, not hundreds of times, but so many times, the books by Jules Verne, because I just loved Jules Verne. There is an Italian author very similar to Jules Verne. It's called Emilio Salgari, and he was talking about Malaysia and, you know, the pirates in Malaysia. I mean, come on. It was like traveling. It was like being there. I loved Rudyard Kipling. So there's a number of things that really push me, even now after so many years, to seek for that thrill of the story, the tale, the fairy tale, the folklore, the myth, the legend. That's why I love Japan so much, because you can feel the spirit of supernatural in your daily life. So I got this deck. These are the lakes. So it's called the Great Lakes Tarot. So obviously this is an image of the lakes. Unfortunately, I've only been to Chicago. I loved it, but I've only been to Chicago. So it is in my plans in the future to explore the lakes a little bit more. And this deck doesn't come with a book. And it's very, let's say, it is very specific to the Great Lakes area. So it is based on folklore, but it's also based on daily life. And I love it. I love, as I said, I really love the black background and the monochromatic or bichromatic images. I really appreciate them. I love this chariot. It's a dandelion. I kind of see the meaning. The strength with this is a particular lighthouse. It's not just a lighthouse. It's a lighthouse that is, I believe, in Cleveland. The Hermit and the Frog with the Wheel of Fortune, and that's where I've started asking myself, I probably need to look for a guidebook, because I don't necessarily know. Temperance card, for example, this is obviously a natural spot. This is existing on our earth. Where is this? I don't particularly know. So it might be something that I need to check out. And the devil is referring to garbage just released on our environment. And I get it. I get the association. But then when I go to the tower, I see a sturgeon. I actually double check. I know it's a sturgeon. But I don't necessarily know why I should associate the sturgeon with the tower card. Is it because they, I believe it's something associated with the fact that they die when they need to, it's a story similar to the salmon, because salmon, they swim up river, and even they go up some waterfall sometimes, and they strain so much that sometimes they shed blood. I've actually seen it. So maybe sturgeons do the same. You see, I'm not scared of telling you that I don't know these things. I don't know, and I want to know. And so why this one, for example, is the star card. I know the name in Italian of this fish. I don't know the name in English. It looks like a luccio. So if you're Italian and you know the name, you can Google it probably. So in any case, this is really interesting to me. I love it. And as I said earlier, I'm not stopping myself from reading with this deck, because, I mean, let's face it, this is the Three of Cups. Do I know how to read the Three of Cups? Even if I don't see anything, this could be a completely blank image or black, And I would still be able to read it because I would read it as the traditional way in which I read the Three of Cups, and so on and so forth. But why would I want 500 decks, as I said earlier, if for each and every deck I would just apply some kind of an umbrella meaning to all of the cards without caring what the intention of the creator was when they chose this particular, is that a fern? Let's say it's a fern to symbolize the Ten of Wands, for example. Maybe because the reproduction is very difficult, they need the wind and certain circumstances. You see, I want to know, I want to understand why there were some choices in this deck. It's not enough that I love it. And by the way, the Suit of Swords is really beautiful. It's got so many animals. Moose, heron, turtle, another frog, or maybe a toad, I don't know, a duck, a salamander, a bat. Then this is an otter, by the way, otter spirit. So for the whole month of March, if you comment on my video, I will put it in the description box below, but basically the one in which I have a good announcement and a giveaway. If you comment, if you watch that video and you comment on that video, not in other videos, not on this one, not on other videos, just that, following the instructions on how to enter the giveaway, I'm actually selecting one winner, which will receive these, a zodiac pack, which means similar bracelets to this one, from the company Otter Spirit. So I'm partnering up with them, and if you don't want to participate in the giveaway, it's absolutely fine, but in the description box below you will find the link and also my promotional discount code, which is always amazing. So the reason why I was talking about this is because Otter Spirit is a company that makes this kind of really beautiful jewelry with the precious stones, and also they, for each and every product that they sell, they donate $1 to various organizations based in Monterey, California, that are dedicated to preserving the life of sea otters. There you go. And the kingfisher, and a deer, and an eagle, and a hawk, I believe, and a lynx. So why do we have a lynx for the King of Swords? Maybe it's a very cunning animal, maybe, I don't know, but I want not to guess. I want to have something that tells me what the meaning is, what the intention was. And I know, by the way, that there used to be a PDF, or rather a link in the Rust Bell publication that took you to a blog entry by the author where there was the explanation of these cards. That link doesn't work anymore. I double checked. However, there is a person who has done a deep dive into this deck and wrote a blog post about the meanings, or rather the meanings for the minors are well expanded, and when it comes to the majors, it's just the title. So it explains to you who this person is, where the lighthouse is from, this lighthouse, where it's located. It doesn't necessarily, this is a particular kind of toad, so there is the circle of life from tadpole to whatever it's called, the middle one, to toad. Then there's a seagull for justice, and it kind of gives you some kind of an explanation. Some other times it only gives you the name of the place, but it's still helpful. So, but this is something that is kind of frustrating to me, because I want to read this with this deck, but right now the only way in which I could possibly read it is by, as I said, applying my knowledge of the RWS to this deck. And it's not fair to the creator, it's not fair to me, it's not fair to the deck. So there's a number of things that, because it's so difficult to actually find the meaning of the cards, they're not straightforward, it kind of makes me feel like the deck itself does not want me to get to know it. And I'm being patient, but at the same time, it's also quite frustrating. Moving on, for exactly the same, this is the Hayworth Tarot, which is based on a podcast, and the podcast is called Welcome to Night Vale. It is a very quirky podcast. If you ever listen to it, you will understand what I mean by quirky, sometimes even creepy. And as a consequence of that, there is a lot of creepiness in the cards themselves. But you know me, I love creepy, I love the horror genre, especially when it's interesting, especially when it's not gory, but actually psychologically confronting, psychologically very intense, like many of these cards. What happens is that this is not one of the decks that I cannot read or I don't want to read, when it comes to the fact that I don't necessarily know all the time the references that I can see in the cards. I can read this deck. I think that this is 50% symbology that is easily understood and 50% references to the podcast, if that makes sense. So for example, when we see this Four of Pentacles, we can definitely see the sense of being stuck in something that you own. You grasped something to keep it with you, to keep it close to your chest, but at the same time, this thing that you grasp has grasped you back and now you're stuck. So I kind of get it, but I don't get the Emperor. For example, I get the Six of Swords, I get the Seven of Wands, the Ace of Swords, the Five of Wands, the Seven of Swords. The Seven of Swords is really intense. And I don't think that everyone has noticed this little detail. So this person has lost his hands. So the hands are actually stuck to the two swords that he had to leave behind. He took too much with himself, and obviously there is a consequence to pay for that. Really creepy, intense, confrontational, all you want, but genius, brilliant at the same time, very interesting at the same time. And that is something that I really want from a deck. And so I believe that there is a very thin line between satisfaction and frustration in this case, at least for me, because I may stare at a card for like an hour or even days trying to understand what the meaning of the card is and why am I not understanding it, why doesn't it click, and that's frustration. But then when it finally does click, then the satisfaction is even bigger because I finally got it. So I want that from a deck. It is something that I'm actually actively looking for right now, because I'm probably in my phase, in an era in which I want to know more, I want to go deeper, I want to be fascinated, I want to be intrigued, I want someone to work hard to get my attention. I'm not easily impressed, but when I was talking about the Unveiled Tarot, that was a wowza deck for me, because every single card was actually impressing me. But this deck, okay, there is one resource if you want to know about these cards and try and make sense of the associations without necessarily listening to 5-6 seasons of the podcast. You actually can go to a website and there is a spreadsheet that is updated live. So constantly updated by fans of both the podcast and the tarot deck, and their own suggestions on how to interpret the cards. That is actually really cool, because it's not the author explaining themselves, it's fans like me that, I will tell, for example, if I see that no one has entered anything about that Four of Pentacles that we saw earlier, I would definitely make my contribution. And so you can actually have a look at that. So that, as I said, it's not like some other decks that really wants me to give up. It's actually giving me some resources. So I'm actually I am quite appreciative of that. But this is one of the decks, and honestly, there's a lot more that we're going to look at today. But since I'm talking a lot, it's just a very chatty kind of day today. I don't know why. Let me just move on. So there's another deck that I really don't feel confident in reading now, and I don't want myself to just fall back into the safety of reading it as if it were a clone of a RWS, and I want to know more, is the Spirit Box or Voodoo Tarot by Fabio Listrani. This deck and I had a very convoluted kind of history, because when I did the unboxing, so this deck was one of my most anticipated decks from Lo Scarabeo for 2024, to the point that I actually bought it from Lo Scarabeo, biting the bullet of paying for shipping from Italy. finding out that they're actually shipping from Germany. Anyway, doesn't matter. And really being disappointed by the cardstock. Having said that, the more I work with it, the more I can feel that what I thought was a very thin cardstock, which meant it's still thin, it still feels thin, but it's also rather sturdy. So I was very worried that this deck was thin, and also that meant that it was easy to damage. It's not. So I retract that. That was my first impression. But also, when it comes to the system used, this is a Voodoo based tarot deck. Do I know enough about Voodoo in order to be or feel confident to read this deck in a proper way? No. Am I trying to learn? Yes. Am I succeeding? No. And it's not for lack of trying, and it's got nothing to do with the deck. It's something that it is very interesting for me, and there is enough information, I would say, here on the guidebook when it comes to the major arcanas. So the major arcanas, as you can see, they're all protagonists of Voodoo, so very famous characters of Voodoo. And you can read about them, and you can also read about the association between Baron Samedi, for example, and Judgment, the Judgment card. And all of this makes sense. So I've been through all of the majors, but when it comes to the minors, and especially when it comes to the renaming of the court cards, it gets difficult for me. That's where I start struggling. That's where I lose attention sometimes. I understand that they use the same renaming. So if you learned what the doll is, that the doll means the beginning of the evolution in the court cards, then the next suit will still call the page, we'll call it the doll in any case. So it's not like they changed the renaming, it's the same, but it only makes it slightly easier. It doesn't necessarily make it super easy. And it's also because it's not traditionally, so when it comes to the explanation of the Page of Cups, it talks about the traditional way to interpret the Page of Cups, embodies a youthful, sensitive and intuitive vibe, yet it's still a bit green and prone to emotional ups and downs. But then, it goes deeper into this specific card. So this card represents a youthful messenger, a dreamer who brings genuine sentiments and a sense of emotional openness that positively impacts our feelings. It ignites creativity, it embodies idealism, sensitivity, and the ability to brainstorm alternative solutions. The problem for me comes when I realize that all of these couple of paragraphs here are just very standard, as in referred easily and straightforward to the Page of Cups in a general way, in an RWS way. I don't necessarily think that this image is explained by these 3 paragraphs, because it's not. And so what I see, and that's where I got a disconnect. So what I see is what I believe is a voodoo doll, and I could be completely wrong, but it looks like that, in a bowl of water. And then what I see is a candle that is lit up. And then here I think it's a scroll with some sacred symbols. And so this to me looks like a ritual, it looks like a ceremony, it looks like perhaps an invocation, I don't know. But I need in this page to be there something that tells me this is called such and such. Yeah, okay, got it, it's a doll, but is a specific one. These symbols are referring to such and such. It is in the bowl of water because it activates it. You see what I mean? It's something that I'm making up. And when I start making stuff up, I stop immediately because I don't have the right to make stuff up. This is not my deck. It's not something that I'm, let's say, informed on. I don't have anything other than a very basic knowledge and experience in my life, because I have been to a Santero once and I've been to Cuba. So I do know a lot, let's say more than nothing, but never near enough as, to give me that kind of confidence. And so because this is a tarot deck and this is the guidebook that comes with, what I would love to have is an explanation of this, just as much as we used to have for all of these major arcanas. And so when it comes to the minor arcanas, and not just the court card, but also the other minor arcanas, you have a pretty good explanation of the card and how to read it, but not this particular card. Who is this person? What are they doing? Why are they dressed like that? Are they a god? Are they humans? So there's a number of things that it is kind of frustrating, and I can assure you it just goes on and on. There's so many. Even this one, for example, the Five of Cups, I would expect this to be a legend, not a legend, but at least something well known. But I don't have any kind of explanation. Of course, it talks about the Five of Cups, but it doesn't talk about this Five of Cups. So this is what really turns into something frustrating for me. Yes, there are symbols at the end for each and every major arcanas, but again, we are not given so much about them. And I would have to study, and I'm doing research and everything, but I can do research on voodoo, but not voodoo associated with tarot, because there's another voodoo tarot, by the way, but they don't have the same symbology. They don't choose the same characters for the same cards. So this would have been the opportunity for the creator, and I love Fabio Listrani. You know that I love Fabio Listrani, so that is absolutely, I love the Santa Muerte Tarot. It's just one of my favorite. But at the same time, I feel like I'm missing something. And it's really frustrating for me, and it feels like the guidebook itself is preventing me from starting to use this deck, because I don't have enough knowledge out of the guidebook, and I don't want to just read it as an RWS. I hope that makes sense. Moving on, there's another couple of decks, and I'm going to show them together because they are by the same creator and they have more or less the same kind of concept. I'm sure everyone has got these two decks, and nowadays you can actually get the Fairy Tale Tarot by Lisa Hunt. It's not out of print anymore. It doesn't sell for hundreds of dollars as it used to anymore. I bought it in Spanish because when I wanted it, I couldn't find it in English without spending that much money. Now it has been reprinted. And the other one is the Ghosts and Spirits Tarot, and as I said, still created by Lisa Hunt. They have a very similar kind of concept. These are fairy tales, and these are ghost and spirit tales. So when it comes to this one, so this one is the Spanish version, and I do have a really big book that comes with it. But let me show you when it comes to the Ghost and Spirit Tarot. So this one has the same principle. It is based on these legends of ghosts and spirit. And so you look at them and you see the Five of Swords. And you look at it and you try and understand what it is. And then you look at the Ten of Cups. And then you look at the Star. And you really don't, if you don't know, the Wheel of Fortune is really beautiful. And I love this deck. It is my kind of deck. I love the vibes. I love the colors. I love the art style. I love how dark it is and its meanings. I love the depiction of these stories as well. Some stories I can recognize, some I cannot. But what happens is that for each and every one of these cards, there's actually a relevant story, which is here. And you can find it in the guidebook, which is deceptively small in the sense that you wouldn't think that a little white book could contain 78 stories, but it actually does. And so let's take the Six of Pentacles. I've got it right here, and let's have a look. So Swords, Cups and Pentacles. So the Six of Pentacles, you go in the guidebook, and it's got this much about the Six of Pentacles. It also tells you the name of the character, Tornak. The Tornak is an animistic guardian spirit who can appear as a human, storing Surabaya. The Eskimo, Angakok, shaman, would serve as liaison between the Eskimo people and the helpful Tornak. Through these ceremonial exchanges, the Angakok could procure medicines, solicit advice, and seek atonement to help prevent misfortune. All the earth energies come together in centrums of abundance. The bear represents protection and the cycle of life. Fish are symbolic of fertility, and the radiating sparkles indicate expansiveness. Feathers indicate a connection with spirit. And then it gives you a short divinatory meaning. It says peace and prosperity will enable you to enjoy more flexibility and freedom. Be generous and spread positive energy with others. I love the fact that I consider this to be enough information for me to be able to recognize this legend and also to understand all the symbols, because it literally points to all of them. Do I agree with recognizing this legend with the Six of Pentacles? Not necessarily. So this one is frustrating for that. So again, like the Hexen 2.0, I'm going through all of these cards because I have to, because I don't necessarily know all of these ones. And it's the same with the Fairy Tale Tarot. And it's a monumental effort. I can assure you, it's a monumental effort. If you have a good memory, you can probably just go through the guidebook once, and that's fine. And then you will be able to remember them, and the next time that I see the Six of Pentacles, I will recognize this myth and I will understand how to talk about the card. But does that mean that I agree 100% with all of these stories and the way they are depicted and associated with all of these cards? No. And so is it worth it for me, is it worth it to get to know all of these? Well, it's worth it because I love reading. This is Golem for me, the Ten of Swords. Let me just double check because I actually don't remember. It's worth it because to me, I will always love to read about stories, about folklore, about supernatural tales and everything. I mean, I'm a fan of Supernatural and Grimm and all of those TV shows and all of those books. Of course, it makes sense. Of course, it's worth it. 1,000 times, yes. But will I feel like I'm doing it for myself, or am I doing it because I want to use this deck for a reading? No, I'm just doing it for myself, because I'm not entirely sure that I'm going to use the additional knowledge that I will gather by reading all these stories once I get to read this deck and once I pull the Six of Pentacles or the Ten of Swords. So let's read the Ten of Swords. Ghoul. According to Arabic folklore, ravenous jinn lurked in lonely deserts and graveyards and to feed on humans. Its cannibalistic nature made it a feared vampire-like spirit that sought victims and may travel through the desert, a risky affair. Ghouls were adept shapeshifters and could take on the form of animals. Ghouls also devoured children, proving that its evilness knew no bounds. There's no place to hide. The swords are everywhere, reflecting the many ways darkness can descend on you. The skulls and bones are remnants of past mistakes lingering in the dust. Spirits on the horizon beckon you to liberate yourself from the situation and move on. Divinatory meaning: disaster is imminent. There is nothing you can do but get past the darkness and regroup. Do I agree to this association with the Ten of Swords? I would say partly so, but it is questionable to say that disaster is imminent. Disaster has already happened. What worse can happen than being stabbed in the back 10 times? That's even an overkill. You have hit rock bottom. I agree with the part that says you need to move on, fair enough, but the worst has already happened. Otherwise, you're still in the Nine of Swords for me, not in the Ten of Swords. So do I like the association with the ghoul and the way in which the ghoul is represented in the Ten of Swords? Not necessarily. You see what I hope that I'm making my point clear. I hope so. I hope that I'm not just creating more confusion. And I really hope that you understand that I still love these decks. There is no way that I will part ways with the Ghost and Spirit Tarot, or even with the Fairy Tale Tarot, or with any of these decks. Perhaps one, but I'm not going to say which one. There is no way, because I love them for many reasons, and only the fact that I cannot use them or that I don't feel confident enough to use them yet doesn't mean that I will reharm them. But it does mean that I feel frustrated, and it feels almost as if they were the ones pushing me away because they don't necessarily open up easily to the understanding of the meaning of the cards. And this is the Fairy Tale Tarot, but the Spanish edition. And as you can see, the art style is very recognizable. Of course, it's Lisa Hunt. There's a number of decks by Lisa Hunt. I would say I love also the Parcel Tarot. The only reason why I don't have that deck is because it is landscape oriented. and I have the Hardscape Tarot, and it's the only landscape oriented deck that I've got. And the reason why I do have that one is because it is very sweet, very, very sweet. And I kind of got it when I needed it, but I don't use it because I just, every time that I want to use a particular kind of spread, I have to rethink it in my head because it just doesn't work the same way. The layout, when you have a landscape oriented deck rather than a portrait oriented deck. But this has got the same principle as the Ghost and Spirit. You just go through all of the images, you read the book, you understand the stories behind this, and you relate to them. And then you ask yourself, do I actually relate to, do I think that Little Red Riding Hood is representing the innocence of the fool? Well, yes and no. I mean, absolutely. But Little Red Riding Hood, at the end of the day, is a story with like many, many kind of interpretations that you can have. And on the one hand, it is that kind of foolishness in taking the first step, but at the same time, sometimes I'm judgmental of her personality, as in, you're taking life in a much too easy way. And I don't necessarily believe that the fool is represented 100% by her. I don't know if it makes sense. I believe that the fool has a sense of adventure that is not just being oblivious of dangers in life. It's not just being uncautious. It's not just being, I would say, vain for vainness sake. The fool is like that because they trust in something. They trust in the spirit of adventure. They trust that they need to move on, and whatever happens, they will make it. There is a sense of courage, and that's why the fool is called the hero. When you look at the major arcana, that is the fool's journey, but at the same time is also called the hero's journey, because it takes a hero to do what the fool does. I don't necessarily identify Little Red Riding Hood with a hero. I just think that she's very unaware and la-di-da, and that's the story. That is exactly let's not forget that fairy tales were made up as cautionary tales, and not just for children, but they are literally cautionary tales. Okay, so talking about this, in any case, it's really interesting for me to look at these decks and try and understand them. And at the same time, it really supports my thirst for knowledge, the fact that I really want to understand them and what they mean. But at the same time, it feels like they're pushing me away because they are more difficult than I thought to understand them and also understand their association. So that's the reason why I am actually talking to you, to the community, and ask you for help. If you have any additional resource that you think that may help me to get to know these decks a little bit better, or in a sort of an easier way or a more efficient way, please let me know in the comments below. It will be very much appreciated. But for now, have a great day.